Some say Trump is just a politician. Others swear he's a phenomenon. The fact is, no other name has so divided America and the world in such a short time. Some see him as the salvation of the empire, the man who dared to challenge the system and say what no one dared. And others see him as the beginning of the end, the symbol of the arrogance of a nation that believed itself eternal. But what if both are true at the same time? Trump 2025 isn't just an election. It's a battle for America's soul. It's the return of a power that blends charisma, controversy, and an almost mystical ability to manipulate the masses. He's loved as intensely as he is hated, and perhaps that's precisely what makes him so fascinating. He represents the living paradox between the promise of freedom and the fear of tyranny. What's about to happen isn't just political, it's historic. The American empire, with all its glories and wounds, appears to be facing its greatest test. And at the center of this storm stands a man who understands the game like few others, and who could redefine the future of the entire planet. So like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay informed about the biggest events in the world and how they can affect you. The return of the empire. When promise is reborn. It was as if history had hit the replay button. Trump returned to the scene with the same look of someone who had never accepted losing the throne. America, tired of empty promises, began to see him not just as a politician, but as a symbol of power. The kind of leader who speaks his mind and does what no one dares. It's curious how empires always seem to need a figure to embody hope, even when that hope is shrouded in controversy and conflict. Trump's return ignited a collective feeling that the old empire could still rise from the ashes. But what truly fascinated people wasn't just the man, it was the myth behind him. There was something almost cinematic about watching him defy the system, as if he were a character written by fate itself. For many, he represented the promise of a new era of freedom and prosperity. For others, a dangerous risk of regression. Yet Trump knew how to use every word, every gesture, to reignite the flame of American pride. And this skill, as rare as it is powerful, is what turns leaders into legends, or threats. While analysts wondered whether America was facing a renaissance or a historical repeat, the world watched in silence. The empire was pulsing again, and uncertainty hung in the air like a harbinger. The future seemed about to be redrawn, not in conference rooms, but in the emotions of people who once again believed in something greater. And perhaps deep down, that is the true strength of an empire. The invisible power to move hearts, before it moves armies. The divided empire. Between loyalty and revolt. No empire falls solely from external attacks. It crumbles when its own people begin to doubt their beliefs. Trump's America experienced exactly that, a mix of blind loyalty and flammable revolt. On one side, there were those who saw him as the guardian of freedom. On the other, those who accused him of being the very threat to it. Social media became arenas, words became weapons, and power ceased to be institutional and became emotional. It was the Cold War of the digital century. Trump seemed to understand the new battlefield better than anyone. Every tweet, every speech, was calculated like a chess move. He knew that the true empire wasn't maintained solely by armies or economies, but by narratives. And in this game, leadership was measured by the number of hearts inflamed, not votes counted. This was his genius, and also his downfall. Because where there is too much passion, conflict is inevitable. While allies cheered, adversaries armed themselves with laws, denunciations, and trials. The empire shattered into invisible pieces. Families, friendships, and even churches split by political opinions. It was as if the entire country had lost its mirror, and no longer knew who it was. But amid this chaos, a new kind of power was born. The power to question everything. And perhaps it was just the beginning of something even greater. The global power game. Allies, enemies, and interests. While America struggled internally, the world watched with watchful eyes. Trump knew that power isn't achieved with speeches alone. It's built with alliances, threats, and silent moves. Russia, China, Israel, the Middle East. Each country was a piece on his strategic chessboard. The once uncontested American empire now needed to reinvent itself in a scenario where brute force was no longer enough. And deep down, he seemed to enjoy this game. With his unpredictable leadership, Trump transformed diplomatic meetings into veritable spectacles of negotiation. A compliment today, a sanction tomorrow, and the whole world tried to decipher his intentions. For some, it was the return of pragmatic diplomacy. For others, calculated chaos. But no one could deny it. Under his leadership, international politics became exciting, almost theatrical once again. His every gesture rewrote a chapter of the American legacy, sometimes brilliant, sometimes dark. Meanwhile, new powers were emerging, testing the limits of Western freedom and dominance. China expanded its influence with money, Russia with fear. And in the midst of it all, America struggled to keep its crown intact. The global conflict was no longer about bombs, but about algorithms, oil, and narratives. And the whole world knew that Trump's next move could change the course of the future. After all, every empire must choose: dominate or adapt. The economic empire, between gold and ruin. Every empire is built on something invisible but vital: trust. Trump's America sought to prove to the world that it still had the power to dictate the rules of the financial game. Promises of prosperity were mixed with threats of sanctions. The stock market vibrated with every speech and trembled with every scandal. He knew that economics is more emotional than mathematical, and he used this masterfully. For many, he was a genius. For others, a modern illusionist. But the American empire was no longer alone. The BRICS were strengthening, the dollar was being questioned, and gold was once again a symbol of security in uncertain times. Trump, with his bold leadership, was trying to reignite the American dream of infinite wealth. However, the conflict between growth and inequality seemed to be deepening. The economic freedom he preached worked well for the strong, but left the weak on the margins of its own promise. Still, there was something undeniable. He awakened the people's desire to believe in greatness again. Even with criticism, debt, and risks, many saw in Trump a reflection of American ambition. That drive to always want more, even on the brink of the abyss. And perhaps this is the secret of every empire: living between gold and ruin, balancing on the thread of hope. The world's economic future, once again, seemed to depend on the decisions of a single man. The new Messiah or the last emperor? There are leaders who rule countries, and there are leaders who rule hearts. Trump seemed to belong to the latter category. For some, he was the savior who would restore America to glory. For others, the harbinger of the empire's downfall. His image transcended politics. It became an almost religious symbol of power and identity. The people followed him not just out of ideology, but out of faith. And faith, when combined with power, is the most explosive fuel there is. His leadership was a living paradox: authoritarian and charismatic, rigid and emotional. Trump understood the soul of the American people like few others. He spoke of freedom, but his actions showed that freedom at times was simply the right to follow him. Still, his legacy was already etched in history, not by the results, but by the way he made the world feel. Because the true influence of an empire lies not in the borders it imposes, but in the emotions it arouses. The conflict he represents is deeper than politics. It's spiritual, civilizational. Trump is both the reflection and the creator of an era in transition, between a glorious past and an uncertain future. Perhaps he's the last great emperor of a civilization trying to reinvent itself, or the prophet of a new era we don't yet understand. In any case, the empire has changed, and so has the world. Ultimately, perhaps Trump's fate mirrors the very empire he represents: grandiose, controversial, and unpredictable. What truly defines a leader? Their victories or the impact they leave on the hearts of their people? What if rise and fall are part of the same cycle, just two sides of the same coin called power? America seems to be learning in the most intense way possible that empire never falls all at once. It just changes shape. But what about you? Do you believe we're witnessing the rebirth of a new era or the quiet end of an old one? Is Trump's power a legitimate force or merely a reflection of a collapsing system? The answers may not lie in the headlines, but in the small decisions each person makes every day about what they believe, what they support, and what they fear. If this topic has made you think, it's a sign that you're already part of this story. So take advantage of this moment. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep following our content. Here, each episode helps you see the world behind the curtains of power and understand the empire that is, right now, being rewritten before your eyes.